What is extremely overrated? Brookendoundrier said. The beach when it's really crowded. Renaissance Slacker said. We used to camp out at AskReddit, a beach that's part of a national park. You have to reserve campsites months in advance. They are very limited. The beach is gigantic, with practically nobody there. You can have bonfires at night on the beach and alcohol is allowed, no glass. Of course the downside is mosquitoes the size of delivery drones. Cap Blueberry said. I'm a pretty pale guy and have always struggled to sit on the beach for extended periods of time, but I bought a $50 canopy tent from Harbor Freight and it has been a game changer. Def worth the money. Obviously doesn't help with crowds but it does help me enjoy the beach a lot more. Alyssa Ferrindine said. I had to delete my Instagram and Facebook. The constant bickering back and forth from everyone about COVID, the BLM movement and every other fucking thing over the last 2-3 years was absolutely draining. Now I stick with what I'm interested in on Reddit and ignore the news long enough until I realize I have no clue what's happening around me lol. ThinkSquirrel95 said. I'm currently dating someone who is more focused on Facebook than anything else. Pisses me off. He's on his phone constantly. I don't suspect of him cheating on me because he goes to work then comes right home at the same time every day. He's just extremely nosy and wants to know everybody's business. Yes, I've had multiple arguments with him about it but he's completely stubborn and doesn't want to listen or change. I seriously think it's about time to put my foot down. He seems like he would be better off single. This way said. Being famous. Everything you do is put under a microscope and people are going to take anything you say as the worst possible take. You can also kiss your privacy goodbye. The fans are just as bad as the people who hate you. You're more of a toy than an actual person. And heaven forbid you have a bad day and get upset, then people will just tell others they seem like a nice guy, but they're actually an asshole in real life. Fame is a curse. Underneath it all 123 said. I can't agree with this enough. When my wife and I got married 3 years ago, we got roped into having this big wedding at a local living history museum because my parents didn't want to offend anyone. While I do appreciate that they stepped up to pay, the location was magical and very us. All we wanted was a nice, quiet, out-of-the-way wedding surrounded just by the people we know, love and care about us, and it ended up becoming this big thing basically over someone else's pride and vanity. Renaissance Slacker said. We cleaned a house for a wealthy family whose name you would recognize. The house was literally spotless. We basically had to vacuum up a single set of footprints in the carpet pile. Because while this was their house, they didn't live there, it was just for entertaining. My boss saw the house they actually lived in. Even with maids it was a pigsty. Renaissance Slacker said Apocalypse Chow said. There's probably a dozen neighborhoods within 2 hours of Denver that have hundreds of these mansions covering acres of land. $1-million homes, squeezed next to each other, more massive than you can imagine honestly, and 2 older folks living in it with a couple tiny dogs. Or one single rich guy, who spends most of his time at work or traveling anyways. They just buy what they're told to, they don't for 1 second think about a goddamn thing. We cleaned a house for a wealthy family whose name you would recognize. The house was literally spotless. We basically had to vacuum up a single set of footprints in the carpet pile. Because while this was their house, they didn't live there, it was just for entertaining. My boss saw the house they actually lived in. Even with maids it was a pigsty. Toe Jam and Toast said. That's why I'm renting an apartment versus a house right now. My utilities are cheap, and I can afford a much nicer apartment than renting a house for the same amount. I'm saving a down payment for the housing market's eventual collapse, again, to buy at a reasonable price and on my own time, trying to find a house that was just listed, see it that afternoon, and make an offer that evening just so I have a chance is ridiculous. FW2 said. My house is 8,000 square feet, about half of that being a mostly finished basement. We don't have kids at home anymore so I built a nice home theater. Knocked a room out and renovated the kitchen into something near restaurant grade. Phase 2 is to foster a bunch of kids, so I'm making 4-5 bedrooms kid-friendly, added an extra full bath to put us at a total of 4.5 and talking to the local agency about good strategies. We're planning on making the place as comfortable as we can for the kids. We get to start in August. FW2 said. Yeah, I don't have any rose-colored glasses on. I know some of these kids will be violent, won't talk, etc. We just want to do everything we can to make them feel safe and know it's a place they can come back to if they ever need it. I've been working on picking up ideas to help make them more comfortable. We got a mini fridge for each room where they can pick out and keep their own food if they want. The bathrooms all lock from the inside. I made a store in a bigger room where they can go pick out clothes, room decorations, etc. Life has been good to us. I intend to do everything I can to help others, and this seemed like one of the best ways to do it. Gersterfel said. I agree, but at the same time, the same is true of celebrities in most fields. Take someone who is at the top of the game in, say, surfing or architecture. Among people who follow those subjects, they'll have celebrity status, but they won't likely be well known to the broader public. The vast majority of our household name celebrities come from movies, TV, politics, 3 or 4 genres of music, out of dozens, and 3 or 4 sports, out of dozens. A 911 owner said, there's this tiny, old bar near me that I absolutely love, until 7 p.m. The place is really small, built in the 1850s with low ceilings and a wood stove for heat, has a great atmosphere, excellent food and a huge tap selection. At 7 p.m. they bring in a live band playing amplified music in this tiny space, and you have to scream your order at the bartender, and even then they usually ask you to repeat it because they can't hear you. As soon as the band sets up, I ask for the check. Buff Duckley said. Absolutely. Diamonds have been used forever but weren't as prevalent until more recently. Diamonds being the only kind of engagement ring is actually something very new. De Beers just had a very successful ad campaign 100 years ago. Not only did they convince everyone that diamonds are the engagement ring, they started this whole you have to spend 3 months salary rule as well. You don't love your soon-to-be wife very much if you don't spend 1/4 of your yearly income on a ring that they convinced society we needed. So to recap, they set the social expectation for the diamond ring itself, set the social expectation for the price you should spend on it. Oh, and I almost didn't mention they own some 90% of all the world's diamonds. And BTW diamonds aren't rare. They intentionally hoard them so only some are let in the market at a time. This means they can also set the market value of the diamond as well. Watch Adam ruins everything on this one. Renaissance Slacker said. De Beers has warehouses stuffed with diamonds. I guess they'll hold on to them until artificial ones created the market and sell them to industry or something. Read an interview with the guys who owned Artificial Diamond Labs. Both owners ran the lab start no signage, ownership concealed in shell companies, because they didn't want to be murdered by De Beers. Big Bart 61 said. It's called addiction. You might hate them but you grow a dependence on them that is hard to break away from. I'm an ex-smoker and there isn't a single day I don't think about having a cigarette, but I work hard to ignore them. Haven't had a cigarette now in over 2 years. Buff Duckley said. As the last person said, it's hard to explain how good it feels. And nicotine actually has cognitive effects. It helps you think more clearly and remember more. I quit last year. Which it took forever to be able to do that. You have no idea how hard it is? Don't get me wrong, it sounds easy. It's bad for you, it costs a fortune, just decide to put it down, but it isn't that simple. Nicotine is so addictive it's harder to quit than heroin. But even harder than the physical addiction is the actual habit itself. There are still times like after dinner or having a drink and playing cards, I have the urge for one. I know I will never pick back up again. This time really was the last, but I wish it wasn't a stone cold killer because it is really enjoyable too. Side note, quality is everything. Isoult Darcy said. As a French, the thing is, they are not fancy, at all. It was a common poor people dish. But like most of French dishes, foreign countries, and a few French chiefs like to say it's fancy while it's not. So I guess people are expecting too much. For example, macarons, it's not that good, it's easy to make but people eat it as a delicacy. Onion soups? In every French restaurants abroad, super fancy expensive, a delicacy. In France? That was the peasant would eat after a day with his cause in the Alps. Random said VPN services. They are advertised such that a person would think if they use one they are anonymous. All they do is hide your public IP and encrypt data and transfer that's usually already encrypted. Your identity isn't being stolen during upload or download of data. It's being stolen because you willingly choose to post personal information on social media and allow Google and Apple to track your every move. VPNs are a security solution with a very specific purpose. Most people don't use them correctly and are essentially locking their car but leaving all the windows down. It's annoying to see every other ad on YouTube making outrageous claims about the software they're peddling as if it's a one-stop shop for total internet privacy. Captcha Imagination said, Netflix used to be awesome, but now I feel like I'm paying way more but watching way less. Prices in Canada have jumped to 18 Canadian dollars and 99 cents plus sales tax. I think I have paid 2 going on 3 months now where I literally have not watched one thing. The selection is so bad I'm just watching trashy reality TV on Hulu instead. I think when I first started Netflix it was 9 Canadian dollars and 99 cents or just above that. I like the idea of them doing international production in theory, but in practice, most of the stuff is unwatchable, and even when it's good my appetite for foreign language stuff, that is, reading subtitles, is not as high as I would have thought. It used to be a treat that you were willing to make an effort for, maybe on a date. Not something I want to do on a Tuesday night to relax. We should be able to filter out genres. Like I'm never going to watch an entire Bollywood film. Stop trying to push it on me. Also, I think by watching so much crap, I have convinced the Netflix algorithm that I'm some sort of a crap lover, so they offering up steaming platters of more crap. Sparky Pants McG said, okay, so it's not just me. For a while I thought it was because I got HBO Max and so that was where all my attention was going, but honestly, I haven't found anything enjoyable to watch on Netflix in a while. The past few months have been me scrolling those stuff, not finding anything of interest, closing the app and finding something else on another platform. Habitat Green said, I can see it being a hassle if you don't like foreign stuff. I'm Dutch, so European. I exclusively watch everything in foreign stuff and with subtitles. After all, English isn't my native language either. So, yeah, I hop from American to British, to Swedish and Spanish, to Korean and Chinese, to Japanese and German. The way there is tons of great stuff, even if the production value or even acting quality might be not on par of that of a high-quality Hollywood movie or whatever, so long as it is fun, it is fun. Questions it all said. Fireworks. And I have felt this way for so long. I have been seeing this posted a lot on Reddit lately because of the 4th of July celebrations, but from age 11, 20 years ago, I have just felt so contemptuous towards something so wasteful. For a long time my family and I would work New Year's Eve gigs, happily by the way, and it would be some great thing for everyone else to watch the exploding sparks colorfully dance in the sky, and it all end in a puff of totally underwhelming nothingness. All I ever thought about that was what a waste of money. Don't get me wrong, it can look pretty, but after repetitious pops, bangs and general loudness it's just not for me or worth my time. Sparky Pants McG said, if you have good water. See there, that's the problem. There are a lot of places where the tap water is fucking disgusting. I highly recommend a good filtration system if you live in a city where the water sucks, but even then there are situations where bottled water is kind of needed. Hurricane season for example. Even with small hurricanes the odds of losing power and water is still relatively high, and having those extra water bottles comes in handy. Also, and this is just me, it's kind of a pain in the ass to lug around a giant or usable water bottle all the fucking time. Don't get me wrong, it's still my go-to. However, bottled water's a little more compact and easier to travel with. I make the conscious effort to recycle the bottles and use them sparingly. Dramatic Choice 4 said, being a YouTuber, the pressure of having to keep entertaining your audience with the same content while still innovating enough so they don't get bored. Plus all the worries when it comes to demonetization and finding an alternative reliable source of money. I can't tell you the amount of YouTubers that had a massive boost of visibility and gained sometimes millions of subscribers a couple of years ago only to make just 20k views on average on their videos nowadays. I feel extremely bad for those who quit their studies to become full-time YouTubers and that are now barely making any views, compared to their subscribers count. Pesticide Dream said, traveling. The experience can be fun and it's good to do new things, but I hate long road trips. I hate airports and cramped airplanes. I hate how expensive it is. I hate not having all of my things. I hate the pressure of trying to get everything done in a small window of time. And after 3 or 4 days I just want to be back home. I still do it and it's tons of fun to do and I'll never stop, but it's not OMG everyone needs to travel so life-changing. I am the ultimate human because I travel. Isoult Darcy said. France? And I say that as a French who used to work in tourists' offices. Equals, yes, France has stunning things to visit, beautiful landscapes, great food, awesome historical places, various weather, natural sights, etc. But, equals, since it's so overrated, especially Paris, many tourists are disappointed once they got here, especially the Asian. Equals, most of our tourists' accommodation are outdated, overpriced, people barely speak English and owners don't make any effort. Tourists come after all and we are the best, so why would we change or update anything? Only the luxury part of tourism is 100% fine and some biggest hotels, campsites, etc. For like one good hotel, guest house, restaurants, etc. I've seen a dozen of bad ones. The old owner's kid Pokemon sheet for a bed in a guest house, a tiny portion of very bad cheap meat in the restaurant for like 30 euros, a non-English speaker, grumpy owner that don't see why she should improve her English since speaking with hands works well, so many owners saying the bedroom is wheelchair friendly since there is only one small step, and gravel way to reach the house, and steps in the bathroom, and tiny hallway, doors impossible for them to open, etc. But what? You need all of it to be flat to have the disabilities label. Is that a joke? The bedroom is on the ground floor, that should be enough. And they can always sleep in the garage. There is a sofa. Owners complaining because you call them in a national holiday to send them a client. It's a day off. Let us sleep! Exclamation point. Dude, you work in tourism. Equals, yes, our food, landscapes, castles are amazing. But you got equally amazing one in Eastern European countries for a better price, better welcome, modern hotels, cheap gourmet food. And by the way, yes, France got the most of tourists, easy when you count everyone. Yes, the British family crossing France in one day, with no stop to any restaurant, hotel to go to Spain is counted. Yes, the student that come back home on weekends is counted. Perpetual Implosion said. Having children. It's the biggest wild card financially and emotionally to inject into your life and, usually, your relationship. You're signing up for a lifetime of stress even in the best case scenario and a lifetime of unthinkable pain in the worst. Yes, in most cases, there are moments and aspects of monumental joy punctuating the journey. Whether they outweigh the day-to-day realities and struggles of parenthood depends on a number of factors, including the temperament of you and your partner, your financial resources, and most importantly, luck. Having a child is to play the genetic lottery. You don't know what ping pong ball is going to pop up. Milnock said. Beer may be what allowed our species to flourish as much as it has. It was hit or miss whether the local water could kill you or not. But through the process of fermentation, the alcohol in beer killed off nearly all of the pathogens that were present in the water. Beer in olden days didn't have as much alcohol as it has now, but it was high enough to kill off all pathogens and low enough to quench your thirst without necessarily transforming you into an alcoholic. The most obvious proof of this was discovered by John Snow during the London cholera epidemic of 1854. He had mapped the number of deaths at Broad Street, which allowed him to track down the source of the contamination to a single well. But at the same time, he discovered that one location in the middle of the cluster didn't have any deaths at all, and that was the local brewery.